Good morning, YouTube, on this Thursday morning, 21 May 2021. This is a small space weather summary to cover the impact of the solar wind which came from an equatorial coronal hole of a few days ago. So if you look actually at the speed as I predicted in my last video, I said it would hover around 500 and 600 kilometers a second. And this is exactly what's happening. I also said this solar wind will be sustained, which is always the case when a coronal hole faces Earth. Density-wise, there is a shock, and then it sort of stabilizes afterwards. We see the same thing when we look at the BZ component at the magnetic field strength in black. There is a slight increase in the beginning, then it normalizes afterwards, and the BZ component tilted southwards briefly, but then started to hover around the neutral zone. So what this means in practical terms is that we do have a geomagnetic storm, but a very brief one. So we see it go to unsettled, then it reaches a KP5, then it goes again unsettled. And frankly, I don't expect this to change much. We could have again a period of time going to unsettled if the solar winds start to fluctuate. This is always possible, but very unlikely. When we look at the auroral activity, we can actually see that there's hardly any. That's because the BZ component briefly tilted southwards, but then immediately became stable again, pointing in one direction and hovering around the neutral zone. So not much energy poured in our planet via the poles, except briefly in the south pole. When we look at the ended spiral, there is an event to be expected, and I believe this would be 28th or 29th May, because this stops actually at 26, and we see a very dense part which will reach our planet. However, it is dense in plasma, but very low in speed. When we look at the speed, we will hardly reach 300 kilometers a second or even less. So chances of this being geoeffective is very, very low. When we look at the Cme Tracker, we see a small Cme that happened yesterday at around 22 UTC. And if I look at the Cme simulation, we actually see it miss Earth completely. So there's no chance of an impact. When we look at the magnetopause standoff distance, we see that when that coronal wind arrived, it suddenly dipped almost to geosynchronous orbit. But the thing that I want to show is something else, or actually emphasize. So this is actually a movie. Let me just play it for you. And then I will do some explanation. So what we do have is, oh my god, this is slow. Let me just go to the event itself. So the solar wind arrives at 12 UTC, at around 12 UTC. And the thing I want to show is actually, let me see, it happens at a bit later. So you see there's a lot of energy involved, and this was the fluctuation that we saw when we look at the solar wind. It didn't last long, but briefly there was a little bit of fluctuations, the BZ went southwards, etc., etc. So this is what we are seeing now. So after the initial impact, this is normal. You have the power shock, you have energy pouring in our planet. This is absolutely normal. But then something happens. So I noticed that suddenly there was an increase in plasma or energy suddenly at the backside of our planet. But the thing that I noticed is an opening in the bow shock. And this is starting to happen more and more frequently. This has implications because I will show it, for example, here to make you understand what's really happened. So yes, and this I will do frame by frame so you can clearly see it and expand this actually to the maximum that I can over here in my screen. So why is this important when such an opening happens in the bow shock? Well, The bow shock basically protects us from solar wind. When that happens, when the opening happens, all that energy is gone. So actually it went in our planet. Then afterwards, you can see it again. The pressure comes again. This would be dangerous if, say, there was big Cme coming from an X-flare, for example, when we were already in solar wind flowing from a coronal hole. Because then all of a sudden, if that arrives and our defenses are down, as you can see, it's anyone's guess what would happen, but the chances of damage to satellites, to induced currents, ground currents at the surface of our planet, to geomagnetic storm increasing in intensity are real. So yeah, this is actually important and actually a little bit worrisome. As to why this would happen, I always see when something like this happens that the inner energy, the energy from the inner belts connects before this happens to the bow shock, and then this happens. So is it conductivity? Is it the Van Allen belts collapsing and inducing so the weakness in the bow shock? Who knows? When we look at the earthquakes, we see currently, let me just refresh that. No major earthquakes, but this could change because we did have a geomagnetic storm. And if I have to guess, if for example a 6-pointer happens, I would expect it in this region, at around the coast of Chile or Japan, because when we look, there is a lot of activity in the Ring of Fire as usual in the southern part, but not per se over here. So I do expect compensation movement, so it's either going to be Japan or Chile. We will see. Oh yeah, another thing, since we are talking about seismicity, one of the stations of the Yellowstone is actually showing activity. And this is important, of course, because the Yellowstone volcano is the last one we want to erupt, because it would affect the whole world. But other stations, let me just show the overview again, seems to be normal. So it's just one part of the Yellowstone where the activity is actually picking up, and I do expect this to be an earthquake. Oh yeah, by now, if you haven't done already, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. You can also hit the like button if you actually enjoyed the video. And I will cite a philosophical quote before we leave each other. And I do think this time it's number 46, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no. Oh yes, it's 43. No one is more profoundly sad than he who laughs too much. So it's not because a person is laughing that he is actually happy. In fact, according to this saying, the more a person laughs, the more sad he actually is. And this is just a way to hide that he's actually hurt inside. Okay, this is the end. I hope you actually enjoyed the video. And I really hope to see each other next time. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.